Hey everybody, this is Bo Sandoval, your Congressional District 1 Vice Chair for the Democratic Party of the state of New Mexico, and also your host for the Keep It Simple, Silly podcast, for those who might not be as familiar with the Keep It Simple Stupid, KISS acronym. So happy to welcome you to the podcast today. Our guest today is Greg Bennett, Chair of the Sandoval County Democrats, and we are so thrilled to have this happen finally. Please stay tuned. We're going to be posting every week. Where podcasts are available. So that's Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and we're also going to be posting it to Facebook. So thank you so much for joining, and stay tuned, and we hope you enjoy this episode. I'm so thrilled to be able to sit down for our first KISS podcast. My name is Bo Sandoval, the Congressional District 1 Vice Chair of the Democratic Party of the state of New Mexico. And I'm here today with Greg Bennett, who's the Sandoval Democratic County Chair for the Democratic Party of Sandoval County. Please excuse me.
That was tough.
That was tough to get out. And this is our very first podcast. We wanted to make sure that we were in a podcast space where we're talking to folks about what's going on in the community, and I thought there was a few better people to connect with than our very own county chair from Sandoval County, Greg. And our Keep It Simple, Silly podcast is aimed at just that, trying to make sure that we are meeting people where they're at and talking to people about issues going on in their community. And it starts by having conversations with people who folks in the community might not be as in touch with. So I wanted to sit down with Greg. And Greg, thanks so much for being here to sit down for this very first podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
So this is our attempt through the DPNM to make sure that we are in touch with as many people as possible. And I wanted to sit down with Greg, first of all, is kind of looking at the trends and how things are turning. Despite Sandoval County being a majority Democratic county, we're seeing some slippage. We're seeing loss of ground amongst young people, young men in particular. And I wanted to ask you kind of, your story being kind of that demographic of a male, somebody who it seems that we're losing a lot of traction with, what your story is and what your background really is in becoming a Democrat and getting involved in the party.
Wow. Okay, so we want to go back in time. How far back do you want to go?
Wow. I guess to the very beginning.
Okay, so I come from Oakland, California. Born and raised in Oakland, California, and went to Cal State Hayward, where I got my bachelor's degree in chemistry. After that, traveled up to a little place called Washington State University, which was kind of it was a shock to my system, because you went from Oakland, California, which you can understand is very urban, into a very rural school. So that was one of the first things. And by doing that, you get kind of out into a different group of people. So anyway, I can get back to that later. From there, I went and did I got my degree in pharmacology and toxicology, a PhD, and then I went to Cincinnati, Ohio, where I did a postdoc. So again, back to a very urban place. After that, went to Texas A&M, a rural place, kind of. And then after that, went to the University of Nebraska at Omaha, where I was at the medical center. So I've been around the country, and I've seen different places. Now, to ask, why am I a Democrat, or why did I? Next question. I guess the reason is because when you grow up in Oakland and you see people of all genders, all faces, all colors that are not really represented in government at all. And so people just go about their day and forget about what politics is. And I was just like every young kid is back when I was young. Who cares? But as you get a little bit older, you realize that you really do have to be engaged. And I think it's really, really important now for those voices to be heard. Okay. So as we go through all these places and I see what's come down, and I can get into specifics, especially in Omaha, where I really kind of was overwhelmed with the oppression there and people not caring, that the only way that we can stop that is by having some type of government, somebody, a leader coming in and saying, listen, we can do something for you. One of the big passions for me was food for kids. In our daily lives, we go around saying, oh yeah, we're fine, whatever. But you have to realize that 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 kids go to bed hungry in the United States every single day.
Yeah.
And why? We're supposed to be the wealthiest nation in the world.
Right.
We should be able to provide for our own kids, and we don't. We sit back and we don't, and we just say, well, if you don't have it, too bad. There were kids that we saw. Let me step back. There was a teacher, a principal at one of these grammar schools in the Omaha greater area, and one of the schools he worked at, they had kids that were like 75% of the kids were in poverty. Think about coming to school, not only hungry, but these kids were coming to school in January, which is, if you don't know about the Midwest weather, it's kind of brisk during this time of year. And they're coming to school with shorts and thongs or flip-flops.
Yeah, right.
Okay? Or sandals, whatever you want to do. They didn't have any coats, they didn't have any clothes, they didn't have any food. And you expect these kids to go into school and learn? No, they're just trying to get warm, they get a meal, and they can go to sleep.
Yeah, right.
So they're not learning. Another place that he worked at for a couple of years, it was 90% were government subsidized free lunches, which means that they're in poverty. Again, the same thing happened. These kids are not being taken care of. They're not being fed. If you don't feed your children, how the heck do you expect them to be anything but stupid? Because they're just cold and they're hungry.
Just trying to
get
meet the bare needs of survival, right?
Yeah,
right.
Just trying to get through the day.
Yeah.
And if you can't help kids that way at the most basic level, then where are you going to go?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You're going to shun all those people. Here, you look around and you say, well, we're kind of, Rio Rancho is kind of an affluent place, right? There's no kids out here that are, and you'd be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This is why we have this program, Feed Rio Rancho Kids. Why? Because kids go to bed hungry, and we want to give them food during the weekend when they don't have any food.
Yeah.
During the week, at least they have some school supplies, but now they don't. So that's kind of, I've seen it throughout the United States. I've been around the United States. I've kind of seen it, and it drives you. So what do you want to do politically? What do you want to do? Well, I want people to be engaged, and that's why why am I a Democrat? Because their value system fits in with my value system, what I think is right.
Yeah.
I don't think corporate America should be living off the backs of people. I think people should be helped by the corporations.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about the Feed Rio Rancho program as well, but I think kind of what you talk about as far as value system, I think talks or speaks so much to my story about why I was a Democrat, and I think why so many people that I talk to who are Democrats, why they are Democrats, about kind of that value system of looking out not just for yourself as an individual, but for the larger community. And I think to your story and your experience in Omaha, talking about seeing some kids who not only didn't have the adequate nutrition they needed, but the adequate clothing they needed. And to your point, we're just thinking about how to get through the day. I think that's really powerful for a lot of people to get involved. And I'm curious, just from your background, were your parents politically involved? Did they inspire any of that, care for other folks, or that value system you talk about? Or I guess, how did that value system come about developing for you?
I guess the easiest way to define that is to say that I grew up in an Irish Catholic house. And doing that, we gave back to some of the community. For example, during I think it was 8th grade, we had to do an outreach program. All the 8th graders of our little school went out, and where did we go? Well, we went to the local nursing home, and we did stuff there. And yeah, did we make fun and have to do it? Oh, was it a drag? Yes, it was. But at the end of that, you look back on that and think, it was a pretty cool time. And why was it a cool time? Because we got to sit with people that weren't our parents, but had stories that could tell us what was going on, and would joke with us or play cards with us or whatever. So as far as that goes, you always have to give back to the community. I mean, that was instilled in my brain. And that was, so if you were blessed by giving something, give a little piece of that back to the community in one way or another. I mean, it's a value system of what do you think is important? Do you think being by yourself and isolated and say, well, I have mine and just go away?
Right.
Is that important to you? You're probably not a Democrat. If you're sitting there going, listen, I have something to give back to the community, I think that is where it's at.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of my whole belief, especially as being someone who comes from a Jesuit Catholic background, is really based in a perception of service and giving back. Jesus talks about in the gospel about how the best way to help someone is give someone your own shirt on your own back. I think that's kind of the capacity that we as a party try and approach our mindset with, of what can we do in the immediate moment to help someone else without casting judgment upon the circumstances they may be in, that we have never had the perception or had the ability to walk in their shoes to understand exactly what they're going through. So I think that's a lot I can relate to it. And I'm just curious, were your parents, have they always been voting members and always active? And
No, well, I have no idea. So my father died when I was somewhat young. I was 16. I had just turned 16. So he passed. And so it was really kind of before you have those discussions of, what's important in the grander scheme of life. What you have, up to about 16, 17 years old, you're told what to do and you try and do it or don't do it, and you get in trouble, you don't get in trouble. That's kind of where we were. As far as my mother goes, was she involved in politics? She was concerned about politics because, again, I think that she would say that you have to not only give things back, but things should be more equitable than they were. And that's even today, I think it's true. Mm-hmm. Things should be more equitable than they are. People are being left behind. People are being tossed out because, I don't know, you don't love the right person or you don't like this person or whatever their problems are. But yeah, it goes back to where you started, your roots. You talk about being in a Jesuit household or in that kind of a upbringing. Mm-hmm. If you're there at kindergarten from the time you graduate, of course you're going to have that value system. Even if you were one of those rebels who wanted to be, those value systems are still going to be important to you. Yeah. How do you reach out? How do you teach? How do you do things for other people? That's the deal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I guess I just asked kind of to try and bring the conversation full circle and trying to think about some of the demographics we as a party are losing. Not only do we see such low turnout in general amongst younger folks who are registered to vote and don't turn out to support either political party, but I think traditionally a lot of the data shows, and I'm sure you and I both know how young people, and especially in this state, Hispanic males have supported Democrats traditionally for a long period of our state's history. And I'm just curious, given that background of service-based initiative where that was really your overall guiding, North Star, if you will, what kind of for you was able to translate from just that service of trying to be the best person you can be, of giving back, of acknowledging the problems of your community, into being an active member who not only votes in local elections, but to your point of rising within the largest growing county in the state of New Mexico to be the county chair for the Democratic Party. I'm curious how that level of service translated to direct political involvement for you.
Well, okay, so we were always involved with the food banks and stuff like that, trying to help people out and doing the same things that Fedra Rancher does. And I'm giving them plugs when you may not want to hear plugs, but
no, we can talk about them. Yeah.
But we always did that. I mean, back in Douglas County, in Omaha, we were involved with that, putting the same kind of stuff together, putting backpacks together for kids, and we would send out, we would put together maybe 1,000 of them in an afternoon or something like that. So we've always been involved in that. Now, how did I get involved in this, where I am now? Well, it was kind of a gradual jump in with both feet, kind of thing. I got really, really upset when the mayor came out and said that he had won an election by a landslide, or by whatever his terminology was.
And this is the Rio Rancho mayor.
Yes. And so when he did that, I kind of looked around and said, "Well, how many people actually voted?" And I saw that it was like 7%.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, 7% of the people voting, and you call yourself a mandate, was what he was. And I said, you won, I'll grant you that, but there was only like 8 people that voted, so what the heck does that really mean? And I'm being hyperbolic.
Right.
I understand. But the thing is that I thought, what the heck, this is wrong. Why aren't people voting? So I went down to a First Friday meeting, one of our, regularly First Friday meetings that we have, and sat and listened to somebody who, I don't know who, and I sat next to somebody, and I said, what's this deal with not having people vote? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, there's only 7% of the people voted for the last Rio Rancho mayor, so what the heck does that mean when you only have 7%? If I do my math correctly, it means like over 90% of the people didn't even vote.
Yeah.
So why? And he goes, well, you have to talk to 2 other people. And he introduced me to Chris Dahl and to Alex Byland.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, oh, so where do you live? And I said, well, I live, where I do. And they said, oh, okay, that's up for election. So why don't you run for, county commissioner? I said, okay, I will. And the whole point of me running for that was to try and prove people wrong, that I could do something to get people out and actually vote. Because I was stupid. Because that's what you are when you first jump into this pool called the political abyss, if you will.
Right.
So you jump in with both feet and you sit there and say, listen, what can I do? And at the time, it was going door to door. And so I knocked on thousands of doors myself without the help of other people. The help of other people did even more for me, right? So I was out knocking every day. I would spend 2 to 3 hours every single day out knocking, walking the walk, doing what I had to do, and meeting people and asking them, why aren't you voting? Oh, I'm voting. No, and this would be the common occurrence, is that I would say, are you going to vote? Oh, of course I vote. I vote in every single election. Well, if that were true, then everybody would have been, the mayor wouldn't have had only a 7% people. I lost, which didn't mean that I was bad or I had a bad thing. I just think that nobody knew me. When I came in, I was nobody. So it goes to prove that you can be nobody and actually run. It's okay. And I think we did a pretty successful campaign. We got about, I want to say, 46% of the vote. And they said something about, well, you're only going to get like 43%. It would be the highest that you would get. So I beat them by the prognosticators by about 3%. So that's okay. So maybe my knocking on doors did a little something.
Yeah.
I don't know. We generated enough money to do mailers and things like that in a very short period of time. And I think that, it was a good campaign. I reached out heavily to the unions because I found out that here was a right to work county, if you will, even though it had no meaning to it. But the county commission said that, we're a right to work county, which means that they don't really like unions. And I was like, no, you have to have unions because they pay a living wage and give people some dignity in their age as they age. And that didn't, they supported me, and I tried to do my best that I could, but I came up short. So that's how I got in here.
Yeah.
After I was done and I failed, I thought because the county had given me money, seed money to do my campaign, that I had to give something back.
Right.
And so that's when I went for vice chair. And I spent 2 years being vice chair, and then this last time I was elected chair. So that's how they kind of got to that point.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
no, it certainly makes sense, and it's certainly an experience of seeing how you can get involved in your community, running for office, and then as somebody, for folks out there who may not know, I was also a former candidate for county commission here in Sandoval County. I'm also on the same side of history of not being as fortunate as I would have liked to, proud of the campaign that I ran, but also within that shared experience that you and I have of not only being Democrats, but having ran county commission campaigns. Curious, really, because this is our whole goal of the podcast, is touching people, connecting with people, rather, if you will, who we haven't had the opportunity to connect with. What really in your campaign, and I'd be happy to share, of course, some of my experience and perceptions, do you think we're successful or unsuccessful, and were you to have another shot at it for a local office, what would you do to help juice some of that turnout that we're talking about, so that we don't have folks that are claiming the praise of their 7% mandate?
yeah, and so it becomes difficult because I think it's changing so rapidly now. And I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm in it.
And what was
now.
the year you ran for your county commission seat? That was 22?
So not too long ago. But even though, like knocking on doors and just doing it blindly like we were doing it then, these are a list of doors, go ahead and knock on them. Now we're trying to be more specific, more surgical, if you will, of where these people are, because I don't want to necessarily talk to everybody necessarily. I will if I could. But what you want to do is go in and talk to those people that might be on the fence that I could probably convince you to vote for me. And so how we would do that is better defining who I need to talk to. The thing that I would do now that I didn't do then, one of the things I would like to do is set up town hall meetings in various locations and have them ongoing, where people could stop by and do it. But it doesn't get you to the point of those people that you really want to see and hear from.
Yeah.
The reason being is those people don't show up to town hall meetings, right? You've got to meet them where they are. So that means finding out who they are and where they live and sitting there and knocking on their door and saying, listen, I'm here. This is what I'm running on. How would you like to, what's going on in your brain? How can I help? How can I make government work better for you, for your life, to make sure that you have a better life while I'm in office? And that's, I think, what you have to do, to me.
Yeah.
And meet people where they are. So the younger people, I think that's a big population that has not been tapped into from us. And it's growing, and they are not necessarily engaged. And so how do we get them engaged? And that's where I would kind of have to get some help from people like yourself who are setting up these young Dems societies or chapters,
right,
whatever you want to call them, and be able to sit there and go, yeah, we have this chapter meeting, and come and talk to us. Now I have you engaged with all these younger people, and they can sit there, pull up a stool, and just sit there and start, listen, talk to me. What's going through your brain? What's going through your mind right now? Are you on that precipice of trying to find a way of buying a house, but really you're not really sure if that's good or not? Can I do it here in Sandoval County? Affordable housing, is it available here for people? Those types of questions as one. Healthcare and things like that. Where do I go to get this? How can you help me do this? Those are questions that I best one-on-one telling you exactly what you're going to do, because that person, if you can convince that person, then they'll go home and they'll say, hey, I listened to this bobblehead, and you know what, he kind of made sense. And so I think you guys really should think about this guy. Maybe he will be good for you. And I think that's where you have to do. You have to meet people where they are. You have to, because just randomly going through the lists of houses and knocking on doors and putting down your literature, that's great. The other problem that you have nowadays, and it's happened over the last 4 or 5 years, is people have ring door or
the ring door security cameras, right?
So ding dong, you sit there. In the old days, they'd sit there and go, listen, man, what the hell why are you at my front door? Oh, hi, I'm Greg. I'm running for office. Now they can be in their backyard, in their pool. They see that it's you, and they'll go, listen, just keep doing what we're doing. We don't have to listen to this guy.
Right.
There's some techniques about doing that back when I was running, about ringing the doorbell twice, once, let it go for a minute or two, and then ring it twice, because that's what FedEx would do.
Right.
And so, people, you catch them, oh, FedEx is here.
Must be important.
It must be
second
important,
ring,
right? It's the
Yeah.
second ring, so
Right.
therefore I got to go.
Right.
And so, but now with all the other different types of doors, ringers, video cameras. I mean, I talked to somebody that was at work that was in the south part of Albuquerque. I'm not home. What are you doing on my doorstep? I'm Greg Bennett. You want to have a conversation now?
Right.
Over a little pee hole. Okay, whatever. And you do the best you can, but yeah, I think it's got to be better than that.
So I'm curious if just going off of that, I mean, I think a lot of the dialogue, both from a state level and nationally, as we kind of reflect on the November election, is it a strategy necessity, a strategy shift that we need to have, or is it a maybe content of the messaging that we need to have, or a combination of both? And kind of what I'm hearing you say is it's approaching the strategy in the most concise and precise way, so that we're targeting the right people, meeting people where they're at. But I'm curious if, in your perspective, and maybe there's lots of folks, 33 different counties, and lots of different county chairs who do have different perspectives. But I'm curious if, in your perception, if messaging might also be part of the issue, and retracting and retaining some of the folks that we seem to be losing, young people who seem to be voting for the GOP, not voting at all. We see this media ecosphere, of course, of the Charlie Kirks, the Daily Wire, the right wing, that is so pervasive and has such a space that can cater towards young folks. So I'm curious if it's a strategy, and so that maybe we're not even in those spaces, or if it's a strategy and messaging. I'm curious what you think perhaps about the need for the party to have a message that is more appealing perhaps to young people and some of the demographics we're losing, or if maybe you think we're hitting on that message and we're just missing on the marketing.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, to play diplomat, okay? Because you do have to hit them where they are, right? You have to meet people where they are. If you're going to talk about what's going on in their lives, you have to meet people where they are. So the Charlie Kirks and whatever, I don't spend a lot of time on looking at podcasts, and especially podcasts that I would sit there and just throw a shoe at a screen. So that's not necessarily my cup of tea. But I think the messaging has to change for a given time. If you talk about one thing, or this has always been good, so this is what we're going to hit upon, and you lose people because that's all you're hitting on. You're not listening to what they're saying. You're not listening to how they are circling back to other things that are going on in their lives. And I think that we have to, Clinton was one of the first to say it. I think maybe, at least in my lifetime, was, it's the economy, stupid. And really what is important is those things that people talk about around their table, their dinner table conversation. How am I going to get my rent? How am I going to get my food? How am I going to take care of my kids? How am I going to do that? And if you start deviating from that to let these other things that are going on in the world, I think you kind of miss people, and especially the young people, because that's what's important to them.
Yeah.
They've got blinders on because they're young. They're not necessarily kicking back in their old time and just letting it go and go, well, what's the bigger picture here? They've got mortgages to pay, they've got kids to feed, they've got things that they've got, and they have jobs and they've got to do this stuff. It's not like they're retired sitting around looking at each other. So I think that there are different. The other thing is that I think there are different populations that have different needs.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can talk about Social Security for my age group, right? Well, for your age group, it may not really be all that really important to you because you really haven't put that much time or energy into it yet. And so it may not be that important. So really, to go to a bunch of young kids and talk about how the Social Security system is going to change, that might be okay, but you know what? I think the messaging there has to be a little bit more tailored to who they are and what they need from government,
Yeah.
as opposed to, oh, this is what we are. in my opinion, and it's strictly just my little Greg Bennett opinion, is that I think we missed on the abortion issue in this last election. And why do I say that? I think that abortion is health care. So don't get me wrong with that. I think it's very important for women to have that. And we could go into a deeper dive into why I really believe that. But that's, I think it's important that they have those abilities to go and take care of their body the way they need to.
Mm-hmm.
What happened that I saw was that states started saying, okay, we're gonna split. What we could say was the people that are running for office, you're against abortion, so therefore I'm not going to vote for you. Okay? But what happens if I take that issue and I divorce you from it? So the states started saying, well, we're going to have referendums on abortion so that you can vote for it or against it. But then you can still come back and vote for your favorite guy or gal. Okay? That is separate from each other. And I think a lot of states did that. And so that abortion thing that we kind of rode high on the 2020 cycle
Right.
kind of fell off because states were doing it themselves, trying to get this referendum. And people weren't thinking ahead, because people don't think ahead, of saying, oh, well, but if somebody gets into the White House, they can just sit there and go, oh, we're going to just make it a crime to do this. They weren't thinking that far in advance. But for the moment, they could divorce those two issues, the person running, the candidate, and this issue that was something that was deep in their soul.
Right.
And so now they could vote for that person and vote for this thing that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
So, gee whiz, I don't have to. And I think we lost some votes there. That was just my own little opinion. But
Yeah.
I mean, and again, that was us not listening to people and seeing what was was right in front of us and not seeing where we were, and then we didn't pivot and go, oh, okay, that's cool, the states can take care of that for the moment, but we've really got to do something because whoever's in that White House has a huge control, as we're seeing now.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, and I think as far as what you said about President Clinton and his whole messaging perception about it's the economy stupid, or it's the economy silly, if
yes.
you will.
Yes.
I think that speaks to a lot of needs and interests of young people and what makes them or incentivizes them to vote and not vote. And I think a lot of it, especially in today, as we try and keep this conversation fresh and interactive to daily events that are going on, I think that translates, at least in my perception, the way I see it, to this recent New York City mayoral primary that we have.
Mm-hmm.
We have this candidate, Zoran Mamdani, who's a first-time assemblyman. He's only held the position, I think that's his only real political experience. But he challenged really the Democratic establishment, if you will, of former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Comes from a political dynasty, obviously in the state of New York, and having served as a former governor, many polls had him slated to be the favorite, and he ran against this candidate who ran really, I think it was 3 key platforms: freezing the rent, fast and free buses, and free childcare for all. And I think there's a few other policies: $30 an hour minimum wage. I think he has city-run grocery stores. And I'm curious if that maybe in your perception, if his, and I know this is New York City, right? Obviously, doesn't necessarily speak to the greater whole. But I'm curious if that to you is maybe a direction that the Democratic Party needs to head more towards, of that message of economic populism that Zoran Mamdani embraced, or if maybe that is kind of a needle in the haystack and we need to, yes, of course, embrace a style of economics that makes sense for people, but also focus in on some of those social policies that have popular support, such as a women's right to choose. I'm curious if you think that speaks to just the demographics of New York, or maybe has greater implications.
Well, I think it does. Well, obviously it does speak to the demographics of New York because he won.
Right.
And it was, for coming where he was to what he did was overwhelming. I mean, he really pushed his agenda, and it worked. People believe that he's going to do those things. I think that you have to temper this somewhat because that is a very urban area. And here I have to, because I've been around, I always have to go back and say, no, you're not in Oakland, California.
Yeah.
We're not in a place where we have 500,000 people right in one little center. And then if we move out, 5 miles out in a concentric circle, all of a sudden we have 15 million, more,
Right.
1.5 million. The whole state has 2 million people,
2.2,
roughly.
yeah.
Roughly. So to sit there and say what happened in New York is going to translate exactly to here, I think you're missing the boat there as well. I think that we do have to talk to the rural issues and what's going on in the rural things as far as education, getting them broadband, is making sure that the hospitals stay open. And I hope people are getting the idea now, after they've been bombarded with all of this information that's come out about this big, beautiful bill and how it's going to cut these rural hospitals and what's going to happen. Whether you're in Montana, whether you're in Wyoming, whether you're in New Mexico, whether you're, the eastern part of Oregon, those places are rural, okay? They're red, some of them are blue. They're all going to get hit. And those hospitals, they start closing down. What do you think is going to happen? People are going to suffer because of that. So you don't want to do that. That would be a no-no.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do that. But yet this is going to be, most likely, I don't know if it'll be passed, but it will be, it's up on the agenda. So what's going to happen if this does pass? So I think we have to speak to that and how we try to protect that as much as we can. And I think those other issues that have to go along with rural communities, because I don't think that the rural community is being really represented. If I can make that statement, I mean that throughout the whole United States, and I think this is why they lean on the Republicans for the most part. The Midwest kind of goes Republican, is because they get sold this bill of goods that they're going to be taken care of, and these farmers will get subsidies from the government to help them through. You shouldn't count your chickens until they're hatched, but I think those people, if you were to go into those places and you can start telling them this is what's really going to happen to you and I can bring more benefits to you, I think that's where people will sit there and go, well, I don't care if he's a Republican or a Democrat, he's speaking for me. And I think the rural issues here, and especially being out in the Pueblos and things like that, I think those people need to have representation.
Yeah. And I mean, if I can just speak briefly from my new position within the Democratic Party, state of New Mexico, I mean, all credit in the world to the former set of leaders that were in position to get us in a position where we do have, a Democratic state house, state senate. The governor is obviously a Democrat. Our congressional delegation is all Democratic. But I think in traveling around the state and talking to lots of folks, it seems that we've lost sight of the ball in some of our focus on rural communities. Obviously, with where the people are is Bernalillo, Sandoval, Santa Fe County, respectively. So it makes sense from an electoral strategy why we focus on where the people are. But especially within my role as CD1 vice chair, it's heartbreaking to see so many of the counties that have traditionally voted Democrat. Guadalupe County, for example, voted for Obama by 79% in 2012. That's the Santa Rosa area, just over east of the Sandia Mountains. And this previous cycle in 2024, they only voted for Kamala Harris by 14, not 14%, 14 votes. That's something that I think is really concerning. And also Devaca County is a county that, home to Fort Sumter, the Billy the Kid Museum, probably more cows than folks out there, but it's a county that voted for President Clinton in 92 and 96 and still has a Democratic mayor. So I think there's a lot of work that we need to do within this reflection period where we're trying to see where we're missing our mark to re-engage with our rural communities, and that's something I'm very, very interested in, because we need to have, to your point, that presence of showing up where people are. And something that I just wanted to ask you, and maybe you've heard it in some of the folks who are in Cuba, which is the forgotten, if you will, rural city within Sandoval County. I'm curious if there's a slate of issues that maybe we can speak to the benefit of rural New Mexicans and rural communities, as opposed to the negatives of the Trump administration. At least as a young person, I'm a strong believer as the presidents ran in 2016, 2020, 2024. I think, at least in my opinion, the perception of painting him as with the negative paintbrush of the the negative consequences of the policies that he's going to enact and wants to enact are important and powerful, but I think we've been trying that to an extent for 12 years. We know he's radically opposed to the social safety net. We know he wants to impose more tax cuts for the wealthiest amongst us. We know how he feels about immigrants and folks, not from this country, despite, the great fallacy that exists within, our multi-century history about nobody really being here except for the Native community. But I'm curious, really beyond looking at the negatives, if there's maybe a message that we can project to our rural communities that's a positive message to get behind, rather than, we know Trump is going to be, a fascist type of right-wing government that folks can't rely on for their veterans benefits, can't rely on to continue to receive some of the same subsidies they've needed to operate farms. But is there more of a positive message, I'm curious, that maybe we can broadcast to them, that so that we don't have folks choosing between the best of two evils and instead choosing the best option, which you and I think strongly believe is the Democratic Party. And that might be the $1 million question, so I understand if there's not any big issues that jump out, because I think the opposition is a strong message, but I'm curious if there is any positives that you can think of.
I think we have to show, I would like to show, one of the things that I would like to show in the next 18 months is that we are out in that community, helping, doing whatever we can do.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about Cuba, and we just recently, this last term, or which started in April, we finally have a award chair out in Cuba. So now we have a reporter out there, if you will, that can sit there and say, hey, this is what's going on. And one of the first things we learned was that Cuba is busting at its seams. If you listen to him, and I don't have any data to really back it up, but I'll take his word for it, that there was like 10,000 new people moving into Cuba. People are coming from the coast, and they're saying, I don't want to be around people. I want to be out in the rural place. And so Cuba kind of sets up as kind of a nice little place to be. As the demographics change out there, we have to be out there. We have to show some support for people there so they see us. I think the candidates, the Democratic candidates, whomever they are, have to be seen. Because if you do all your stuff behind closed doors and nobody sees you, and you're not on local news, you're never going to be on local news. And if you do get a picture in a paper around here, it'll be very small and fuzzy, and so nobody will be able to tell you who you really are.
Right.
But I think we have to be out there so that people see us. And it's important. That's why when we do things for the community, we always wear in our Sandoval Democrat T-shirts. Why? It's not just to show, that we're doing it. They're saying, listen, we're trying to help the community as best we can. So once we see something, we'll try and help out. We're going to set up at our next executive meeting, I will bring up Cuba because they need some help cleaning up the place. And so we'll go out and we'll do that. So look for pictures on our website and stuff like that. That shows that we're out there cleaning up, helping. And I think that's just one way. If there was another thing that didn't really pan out was veterans, trying to help veterans and trying to get them, especially in this time where you don't know where you're getting are your benefits going to be there or they're not going to be there. And so the Veterans Administration, working with Frank, was they have a bus that goes around and parks there and helps veterans with their paperwork and things like that. They're not medical, which was my fault because I thought they were medical, and I was like, oh, this is so cool because we can get them to come out and do medical stuff for them. And wouldn't that be great? And but that's not what they're there for. They do have for veterans a call center where you can then have them come pick you up and take you to your doctor's appointment and things like that. I don't know how many people know about this stuff. So it's information out there for people.
And
showing up and showing them that. And it's not just rubbing people's nose and, oh, look at us, we're so great because we're the Democratic Party. No, we're just showing up. We're not making any any promises or anything with this. All
Yeah.
we're trying to do is show you that we're showing up, so that when somebody knocks on your door and says, hey, I'm running for, and they go, well, are you a Democrat or Republican? And they go, well, I'm a Democrat. They go, I like what you guys are doing out here. Because they know, they see us in the community. I think it's very important that and you know this from running as a candidate, that it's important to have people, that you be seen.
Yeah.
One of the things that I didn't have enough time to be seen, because I started that afternoon, or I went on a first Friday, and filing was the following Tuesday. So
Expedited indeed.
I had a weekend to kind of get my stuff together, and then we went from there. So like I said, nobody knew me. And that was one of the drawbacks for running, because you have to be seen. I think not only the candidates, but the party that supports these candidates has to be seen and being in the community, and not just in this one little enclave, in this little bubble.
Yeah.
And we have to burst that bubble, because I think that's where people see the Democratic Party, is within their own little bubble.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with what you say about at least showing up. And I think part of the challenge that I also felt in my run for county commission, and I think inspired me, and sounds like inspired you, is that lack of name recognition and the lack of kind of awareness of who candidates are. I remember when I first turned 18 not too long ago and got my first ever ballot to vote, I remember, and this wasn't just the primary election where, you know, some folks don't have contests in the primary, but I got my general election ballot, and I remember how shocked I was to see just how many races there were that were uncontested. So these are folks that, just because they signed up to run, and maybe they've had a primary contest of some sort or the other, but then once they get to the general, they're not even facing a competition. And last I checked, I thought this was a democracy, so I thought that's was supposed to be the whole premise of voting. And I think my hat goes off to you in running and stepping up for that 22 race. I know, you know, the way some seats are drawn favor some political parties more than others, so it takes a lot to step up and get involved. But I think that is a key step to showing up and making the community know that you care enough to get involved and to get engaged. And something else that you said that I wanted to touch on, as far as the question that I had of how do we inspire our rural communities, and I think that answer is something that we've been lacking as of recent years, is just showing up, just showing that we have the capacity to have a physical presence and make a tangible difference in folks' lives. You said we filled our ward chair position out in Cuba, and I'm curious, just for folks who may not have as much familiarity within internal affairs, what is a ward chair, and what are precinct chairs, and how do we divide our counties?
Well, so the county, how we've divided up our county, we have all the precincts that are done by population, and that's taken care of by the state. And then the wards are multiple precincts within a ward. Okay, so it's the next higher level. We have 13 wards. Okay, so we kind of split them up
Within Sandoval County.
Within Sandoval
Right.
County, just within Sandoval County. Bernalillo County is a totally different elephant. Okay, it's a lot larger. And of course, we went to lettering, so we had A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, whatever. It happened. That's going to have to change, because as we get larger and larger, as you mentioned, that we are the fastest growing county in the state of New Mexico, and as that grows, what are you going to have? Ward double A, double B, double C? No, we'll probably go to numbers just like the precincts. But the ward chairs, we have, if in the most perfect world, you would have a precinct chair, and those would be people that were taking care of their own little precinct.
And a precinct is
Just
roughly how many folks? I mean, do we?
Ooh, I don't know how many folks that is.
You can think of it as maybe a neighborhood or two put together.
Yeah, it's
right?
let's say a neighborhood. It's a group of neighborhoods. Maybe not even Enchanted Hills would probably be too big, but you know. So, and I don't remember what exactly the cutoff is for, you know, how many people within a precinct. But it's relatively neighborhoodish.
Right.
Okay.
Good way to think of it.
And so if that were true and you had a precinct chair, that person would be involved in just getting those people together and saying, listen, we have Bo Sandoval that's running for, county commission or mayor or whatever, and we're going to have a little coffee, and we're going to grab all these people together and just let you speak to those people. Okay, now we have 156, something like that, 152, 156 precincts in Sandoval County. We only have 13 wards, so you can see that the wards now have about 10 or so, 15, give or take, about 10, 15 precincts within it. That board chair is involved with all of those precincts and should be overseeing all of their activities and trying to gather some engagement in each one of those people. We go through this, we have a database that we can go through, and we can tell you who lives there and how often they vote and stuff like that. So if a precinct chair got a name that said Bo Sandoval's never showed up to vote, but he's a Democrat, the precinct chair will be knocking on your door going, "Hey, Bo, what's going on? You're a Democrat. What's going on?" So at the most grassroots level, we could do this if we had enough people to say, "Yeah, I'll do that." It's not a big challenge, but it's a challenge, and people have to sign up and say, "Yeah, I want to do this for precinct, 115." And that's what they would do. I mean, and then the ward chair would see a larger group of that. The ward chairs also get a position on our executive committee, so we know what's going on. And again, these people, all these chairs, all these little people that are out there, what they do is they report back to us as what's going on. We have one ward chair that she goes around and she's knocked on everybody's house, like she continually knocks on people's doors, making sure that they know what's going on, who's to vote for, what's going, We have other chairs that are not so active. But you can kind of see how this is all built from the grassroots. It's coming from the most basic unit up to, to a bigger unit, which is the ward, up to the county. And so those people, those reporters, if you will, tell us what's going on, and so then we can manipulate, maybe we should be focusing in on this ward or something like that. Not having a ward chair, what that does is it kind of severs you from the beast, okay? Because you're not there, yapping at us, telling what's going on. If you're not there, then you don't exist, kind of.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot. There's a lot of stuff that's going around, and we're all volunteers.
Right.
And, so
I
we're
think
not.
That's
a
the point
huge
people
thing.
forget.
Yeah, we're all volunteers,
Yeah.
and so we've got our own lives and whatever. And all of a sudden, you go, "Oh yeah, what about Cuba? What's going on out there?" And you go, "Well, we don't have anybody to contact," and so it's 60 miles that way. So what are you going to do? So now that we do have somebody out there, I think that's great. Because it gets us out that way, out into the rural people. And this is one of the reasons I like going to all the pueblos and making sure that they are also seen and we are seen there. Instead of just showing up. Another thing I should say, instead of just showing up during an election cycle, we should be showing up all the time. We don't just want your money and your votes. We want to also give back to the community. It goes back to the same value system that we have as Democrats. Give back to the community and build that up. And if we do that, there's enough, you're watering the grassroots. The grass will grow and we'll have, things will turn out better for us than they have in the past. Yeah,
I think that's really well said. And I wanted to ask too, because I think, in the spirit of keeping it simple, silly, so many times I talk to people and I think a lot of the, trepidation, if you will, or anxiety about getting involved comes with how much confusion there might be. And, well, there's this congressional district, and we just switched in 2020. I used to be in Melanie's, and I'm in Teresa's, and then I also have a state senate and a state house, and there's county commission districts, and there's wards and precincts, and I think that's really important for folks to understand just how we organize as a party from the ground up, getting together a precinct at a time, you could think of it as a neighborhood, getting together those few precincts to be under the organization of a ward, and then having those ward chairs each report to our county chairs respectively. I think it's important for people to understand that process and how much work goes into it. I think that process of having so many people who you can connect to as your representative in one fashion or another can be overwhelming, but it's important to making sure that we can function. I'm curious, do we have all the ward positions filled in Sandoval right now, or how many are we?
We're pretty good. We've done really well this last time. We have 13 and we have 11 ward chairs.
Okay.
So we're good. I mean, relatively good. There were times they talk about where there weren't as many, but that's okay. You do, and it really comes from somebody stepping up and saying, "Yeah, okay, I'll do this." And it's a couple of hours a month to do your stuff. For the most part. It does get a bit more intense as the election cycle goes on. I won't, because we're doing stuff trying to get people engaged as much as we can, so we're out more. But it's something that's very doable for people if they wanted to do it. I mean, it's not like overwhelming. I don't think that it's overwhelming at all.
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask too, hopefully to plug for any folks that might be out there now is, people are feeling really energized and wanting to get engaged and wanting to get involved. They just don't know what avenue might work best for them. So wanted to plug that hopefully. So if there's anyone out there in Sandoval County within these 2 wards that might not be filled, having those positions is just really important. If we want to engage in rural communities and communities that we're not hitting with, I think having those ward chairs and precinct chairs who are on the ground, I think is really important.
It fills a hole. I mean, it really is. We could get down, and we don't have as many. Obviously, we don't have as many precinct chairs as we would like. Again, back in the ideal world, you would like to have 156 or whatever precinct chairs.
Chairs
and all the ward chairs would be filled, and the room would be packed with people that come and want to talk about how we should navigate the next election cycle. That doesn't happen, it's too bad, because I think this is where a lot of the information from those people that are sitting around the table are yapping about. Those are kind of the things that go into our brain, because we are just thinking about what's in front of us. If you start changing this and say, well, listen, if younger people come in and start yapping what they want, then all of a sudden that changes the dynamic of what we do, right? And so instead of just being focused on, this one thing or a couple of things that people around the table are worried about, and we kind of broaden our perspective to those other people to getting involved, and they can bring their own problems with it and say, listen, this is what I think is important. We should be really trying to do this. And I think that's where the discussion starts. But somebody's got to step up and say, yeah, listen, I can do that. And if I can do it, this is the other thing, people want to say, well, how did you get it to be this lofty position? Because I showed up, which is kind of the theory of this little talk that we're having. Just show up, stupid.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
that's 9/10 of it. And it's just somebody who says, listen, I think we can do better, or somebody, I can help out. I can have a coffee with a bunch of people from my neighborhood. And I know that it's difficult these days because neighborhoods are not what they were. People don't know their neighbors anymore.
Yeah.
And this would get you out. But at the same time, we don't just sit there and say, okay, we want you to be the ward chair here, and you're going to do all your stuff right there. That's fine. And just go start knocking on doors. No, we will give you a list of people that are Democrats that you can go and get them engaged, because we had, as you said, we have more Democrats, registered Democrats in the county than there are Republicans. But that dynamic is changing. The Republican Party is gaining on us, if you will. They're having, just getting people out to register to vote.
Yeah.
And we see that, and we are pivoting, and we are trying to get out more to get more people registered to vote as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that we go, people are already registered. And so we're thinking about doing something else, a little bit different maybe, to try and get that next group of people. So where do young people hang out and kind of hang out there? Hey, you registered to vote? I can set you up right here. Because all you have to do, we have a QR code on a vest. snap that, takes you right to the Secretary of State. You can fill out your forms. You're registered to vote. So, I mean, we try and make it as easy as it can be. You know, I think back in the day, you know, I don't know where I had to do it. Maybe when I got my license, I probably, you know, back when I was 16 or 18, you know, I guess that's where I registered to vote. I don't remember. It's been so long ago. They probably just assumed, oh yeah, you can register to vote. That was a long time ago. You know, we only had horses and buggies.
Horses and buggies back at the day, right?
Yeah.
Had to
We didn't even have a DM.
jump on a Peloton for your own electricity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something like that.
Right, something like that. And
Yeah, I mean, if we could plug getting involved, getting engaged from people, young people, and I know they're busy because they've got jobs and families and things that they got to do, then that would help, though. It would help because we get their perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm after, is their perspective. I want to have as many voices that we can listen to sit there and say, yeah, this is an important thing that we need to really take care of, or at least pay attention to.
Yeah. And that's why I asked too, as far as what we still need for ward chairs filled, and then hopefully precincts, and then hopefully from there, not only would I like to encourage full participation, but also hopefully broadening the folks who do participate, so we have more folks who, although they have, you know, beautiful silvery gray hair and lots of wisdom to match with that hair, I think it's also important to bring in some demographics from newer generations. And something that I wanted to maybe stress test or challenge a little bit is maybe a perception that we need to embrace as a party is maybe I say this as a young person, you know, who has gone through, will be the first generation, at least according to data, that's going to experience a lower standard of living than the generation before us, and you know, a whole multitude of things, and inability to afford homes. You know, student debt crisis continues to you know, exponentially outraise the actual value of a degree in many senses. So I'm curious if we as a party are just in talking about the desire to fill as many ward chairs and precinct chairs, and then kind of curbing to that's, you know, only idealistic, if you will. I'm curious if we as a party, perhaps, and maybe would be curious what you think about this, are too conditioned into thinking that the idealistic is unrealistic, and that maybe we, within some of our policies, even within some of the things, just to talk about Assemblyman Mandami, not to reconnect to him because I know we were here in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, but it seems that a lot of his policies and a lot of the counterance to some of the more progressive wings of Democratic politics is that many of the policies and the ideas of filling all the ward chairs, all the precinct chairs, having a $30 minimum wage, having rent freezes, you know, among other policies, free accessible childcare. I'm curious if you think that maybe we are accepting the premise that we have been conditioned into accepting idealism as unrealism, or if maybe it's not so much that we're being idealistic, but just entirely unrealistic about embracing these policies. And I'm curious if maybe the perception that we can fill all of our ward chairs and we can fill all of our precinct chairs should be where we start off with, as opposed to almost yielding to the inevitability of, yeah, of course folks are busy, of course it's going to be challenging to find these positions, but if maybe there's that tonal shift that would be important for us in attracting and expanding our tent. I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, because it's not just the ideologic thoughts of the young, because I can say, you know, Bernie Sanders has been trying to do this for years, and he's kind of an older, gray-haired guy. And I think his policies have been like that forever. And I think we have to think big and progressive. That's the nature of it. So think big, and then you're going to have to take, in my mind, you're going to have to take incremental types of steps towards that final goal. When Obama came out with the ACA, I thought, my God, okay, that's great and wonderful. And then they kept tooling it down. And you can say either we missed we missed it, or it really didn't come out the way he wanted it to, whatever. We did get like 40 million people onto healthcare.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Okay, so was it total bust? No. But ever since then, people have been, and especially on the other side, have been trying to take that away chunk by chunk by chunk. So I think you have to think big. I think you have to go bold. I think you have to do those progressive things, those programs that we want. Because if you don't, what do you got? You have to try. You may not get that final goal, but you'll get somewhere else. You'll get closer than where you are. And without doing that, what do you got? Nothing. So we know not doing anything, and just to sit there and go, well, we just, kids are kids, and they don't have time for bringing it back to ward chairs or precinct chairs. Should we go out and make sure that every ward chair and every precinct chair? That's a lot of time, and like I said, we've got a lot of volunteers, and we don't have a lot of time. So what are you going to do? So we'll deal with what we have and try and generate enough people. And if we do get younger people to come on, and they see that it's not this onerous kind of, it's too much to work, that maybe we'll get more people in, I guess is my hope. The silver people, you're right. They do have a lot of experience. They have a lot of information.
Wisdom, lots of wisdom too.
Yeah, they've got it. But sometimes you need somebody to come in and say, what the hell? Why don't we do this? And you go, well, shit, we never thought of that. Or we say, we thought about that, and this is how it, didn't get to go where you wanted it to go. So this time, let's try another path. So I think, as an older silver-haired person or no-haired person, we get too much into, well, that didn't work before, so why are we thinking about this before, again? And I think you have to have fresh eyes, and the fresh eyes come from the youth, and they can sit there and say, listen, what about doing this? Okay? Or my problem is, how do we get government to help me with this problem? So I think that I think it's a dynamic that keeps going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just one or the other. It's just, how do you get, the stuff that you want to do to get done? How do we do that? And then how do we get people engaged enough to go, yes, to get the momentum to get all that thing done? If you have no momentum from the populace, if you have no engagement from anybody, and you say you want to do this, it may be the best thing in the world, but it's not going to get done. Because it just doesn't have the push, the momentum.
Yeah, and I guess
I hope that makes sense to you.
I think it does, and I think the necessity to you, and even bringing up the ACA and how, is it better to have 40 million people have coverage for healthcare that they otherwise wouldn't have had healthcare,
Exactly.
or just because you don't get a public option or what you want, have no people covered from healthcare.
Right.
I didn't ask necessarily just from a policy perspective, but for some younger folks, and look, I'm somebody who listens to as much media as I can just so I know what's out there. Try and garner a fair balance as I can from all sides. But I know from Steve Bannon, who's obviously on the right, a lot of their strategy, at least in building up the Republican base and increasing the juicing for voter registration for Republicans, like you said, has been based, at least according to Bannon's own words, around a precinct strategy and around a ward chair strategy. So just, and again, in my perception as the CD1 vice chair, when I was stepping into this role, one of the things that I thought was most important when we're talking about how we're losing rural communities and losing touch with the presence and connection, really, is looking and seeing that we don't have Democratic parties in all of our counties was something to me that was like, all right, well, keep it simple, stupid. If we don't have a party in every single county, we can't be surprised when we're losing rural support. And I just wonder if, and this isn't even to come at, Chair Bennett, but just from a strategy perspective, if it would be possible, and not for the sake of, I'm just concerned that we are foregoing the idealistic for the sake of just embracing the realistic, and that makes sense, but I'm curious if there's a way that we can make sure that these strategies are just part of what how we function as a party, part of our operating procedure, to making sure that we do everything we can to have ward chairs and precinct chairs. And not that you're not putting in that work already, but I'm worried that if the GOP and other folks who have interest in Republican politics continue to embrace that from the ground up strategy, if we'll continue to see slippage. I mean, I'm from a background, and the data has continued to show really up until 24 slightly that when voter turnout's high, Democrats continue to win elections, because at the end of the day, we support policies that working class people are interested and engaged in. So I'm just curious if you think it would be an unrealistic strategy, maybe Bernalillo County being a different elephant, if you will, but if it's an unrealistic strategy to make sure maybe it be in the next cycle that we have all our ward chairs and precinct chairs filled. Just so that from an organizing perspective, although difficult as it may be, that we're doing everything we can to engage all of our communities. And
I would love people to stand up and say, yes, we'll do this. The one thing that I can't do is force people to do something that they don't want to do.
Yeah.
You're young, but you understand that you can try and make people do something, right? But at the end of the day, if they don't want to do it, then they're just going to sit there, and it's like, why are we doing this? It's not worth our time. And the hope is to try and generate enough engagement from people who, again, the people that are far outside, that they're never going to come to the fold. They're never going to get there. The people that are close, on the fence, if you will, that are like, well, maybe I could, but maybe it's too much time. If we can talk to them, engage them, and try and massage them in certain ways so that they feel a little bit more supported, then that's what I hope to do.
Yeah.
A lot of this is people go, oh, okay, I want to do that. Well, why not? Well, I won't have any support. Well, yeah, you will. We're here. All the people around the table that we sit at our EC meeting are willing to help. I mean, we will help you. That's not, and we don't sit there and judge and make fun of you, and so it's not like you're on your own. I guess is what I'm saying. There's plenty of support around, but we need to engage people. We have to have people who are willing to step up and say, we're going to do it. And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even it's not an easy question.
No, it's not easy. Even with all the silver and all the no hair. I mean, this is a tough question. How do you get people engaged? And that gets me back to the same question that I was trying to answer when I started to run for office, was how do I get people to be engaged in what we're doing enough so that they get up off their butt and actually go and they vote.
Yeah.
So instead of having 7%, maybe, God forbid, we have 20%.
Yeah, right. I know.
People they'd wet their pants when they see that. My God, 20% of the people voted? My God, what is they going to do? Now, in the last election, presidential election, I think we had I'm going to say a number, and it could be off, but I think around 65% of the people, of the available people in Sandoval County that could vote, voted. So, okay, it's a long way from 7%, but it's the same issue. How do we get that at last 35%, or whatever it is, to get up and say yes? And there are a lot of people, especially young, that are single, it seems to me, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but they seem to be single issue voters. What's going on right now? And if you don't get what I want, then I'm not voting at all. And so I'm staying home. It used to be, I used to make fun of Republicans because they were single issue voters. They were always up against abortion. That was it. So if that was the only question they wanted you to answer, you abortionist or you not, period. That was it. And I go, why? The world is so many other things that we have to deal with. And so if you're just one single issue person, start thinking about other things that are around you that you want to take care of or would like government to do for you. And I think you'll find that there's more than just this one thing. There's housing, it's public transportation. We don't have public transportation. We have something resembling a public.
We're not New York City, it's not. I mean, it's not.
That's right.
Different.
But again, goes back to that. It's your demographics. It's what do you have? What do you need? And so, that's kind of, So there's other issues than just these one single thing. Whether or not you're for or against, whether or not we're for Israel, whether or not you're for or against abortion, whether or not you're for free housing or subsidized housing or whatever, if you're just a single, I think you're missing the boat. And I think that's another place that we have to educate voters on, is that the world, the universe that you're living in is not just a single issue universe. It's not a yes or no. It's not just this one issue that we have to tackle. There's a bunch of things out there. And if you look at totality of what's going on, what person do you think is going to do best in that totality?
Yeah. And I think especially in talking to a lot of young folks, I think the power of some single issues, especially kind of alluded to, the Israeli Gaza conflict that has been going on, I think was certainly a pervasive issue. And some others, at least in my perception, I would say that lots of folks seem to not want to vote because it's a coalition or a cascading, if you will, of all these issues that young people feel aren't being addressed or properly spoken to, that kind of build on one another and kind of inspire or depress that turnout, if you will. And I think that's something I see. But what I wanted to ask you about, just something, and I know we've already been going for a while, so we'll wrap up here soon. I just wanted to ask, because it's been brought up a few times, and in talking to folks who are in my generation, folks who are politically unengaged, the idea of, and you said it a few times now, and it's something that I would find agreement in, and I think if you were to talk about it with most folks, they'd find agreement in, is but the government helping you. I think a lot of people and a lot of perception amongst younger people, and I think a lot of it's based on the American dream that, hey, if I work hard and I put in the work and go to school, that I should be able to afford a home, I should be able to start a family, and there's part of the dream is being able to have that reliance to be able to do that if I want to look in to myself and lock in, if you will, and work as hard as I can, that I can achieve that. And I think so many folks within my generation, where inflation, affordability continue to be challenges, they see that dream as less and less of a reality. So then it comes into question is what can the government do to help me subsidize or kind of make up for some of those inefficiencies, inequities? And I'm curious, is that a belief really that we need to market better? Because I hear a lot of folks who think, how is the government going to help me? We're already $37 trillion in debt. I got a pothole down the road that hasn't been fixed in 2 years. I mean, the light systems don't work. I mean, I get a speeding ticket when I'm not even going over the speed limit. I mean, so many, we're spending billions and billions of dollars overseas. Meanwhile, to your point, 1 in 5 kids are going to bed hungry tonight. We have 17 veterans a day who commit suicide because of a country that has largely forgotten about them and left them behind for social services. So I'm curious, is there, maybe it's in a conversation, maybe it's in how we phrase it, but is there a speed bump that we have to get over in convincing people that government actually can be a tool of efficiency to help people and not just that bureaucratic disaster that, oh my gosh, I have to go get my license and I'm going to be there for 3 hours and I'm going to get to the front of the line and they're going to say, oh, you didn't bring this paper or that paper and you got to go back. And is there a perception issue with that and addressing government actually helping people?
I think if you point out where government is helping, I think that's the point, or that's what needs to be done. If you are, we've dropped the ball kind of on abortion at the moment, because, states are taking care of it themselves and doing, individual things. One of the things that we do here in New Mexico is we provide care. Do you hear any stories about the care for these people, these women that are coming in here and having abortions or doing, that are getting the care that they need? And it may not be just, you have to think about this. You have to define terms. That's another thing that people talk about. They talk about abortion. Okay, so what do you mean when you talk about abortion? Are you talking about a miscarriage? Because there's a lot of women out there that are 13 weeks along and the fetus dies. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do? Oh, you have to carry that all the way? Or no, they come here to a state like New Mexico, and look what we're doing. We're benefiting. Women are benefiting from that. Also, when you start closing down those clinics and things like that, like Planned Parenthood, it's on the chopping block. You close those down. And then there should be stories out there about how these women, where they're going for their health care. This is where people went, or this is where women went for annual pap smears, for STD stuff, for free or for low income people, and for everybody. You know, back in the day, that's where my wife went. Okay. So those types of stories aren't flashing.
Yeah.
And so you don't hear about it. And I'm just taking that one issue.
Right.
And there's other issues that are going on that I think if we showed where government is actually helping people, I think they would understand better that, yeah, it does work for us. Is it always, and I'll go back to the old thing, is government always going to do the right thing? No, it's not. Is there going to be some waste and fraud? Yes, there will be. But at the same time, if there is, go back to the food in the SNAP program, is there waste and fraud maybe in SNAP? Maybe there is, but probably not a lot. But even though, you know what I really care about is the kids getting food. Yeah. And so I really don't care if there's a little bit of fraud in there. I don't care. That's my own personal belief. I think that we should have guardrails on all these subsidies that the government gives. But at the same time, if they're doing what they should be doing, they're okay. In his last election, or in his previous term, Trump did some weird stuff overseas, and a lot of the farmers, because I was in Omaha at the time, a lot of the farmers there were really severely hit by it. And so what happened? Well, he had to subsidize the farmers for it. Okay, now that was a big thing for all those farmers, and it made a big splash, and it made him a hero to them, because he was the one who actually, just like now, he was the one who actually put this in motion, that they wouldn't be able to sell to foreign countries. So all of a sudden he came back and said, oh, I screwed up. Okay, therefore he became a hero. And if you showed that to other people, not just him, I'm just using him as an example again. It's just if you show what government has done for people, instead of just going, oh yeah, it's everyday thing, people will understand, I think, what's going on. I think that's one way of approaching that. Again, it's education of the people to get them engaged, and how you do that is by showing them how their engagement helps out the community.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is based around the whole theme of keeping it simple, silly, stupid, silly, whatever word we're going to use. But I think in talking to people a lot of times in my run for county commission, and in talking to people around the city or the state who have concerns about how government might work and are proud capitalists, my whole point is there's tremendous systems of efficiency from the government, and the biggest one I always point to are emergency services. If you're, God forbid, anyone's home catches on fire, there's a fall, a slip and a fall, you're not pulling out your phone book or Googling which medical service has the best response time and might have the cheapest, rate. You're not seeing which fire department has the best hose and the most access to water. You're calling 911, which is a socialized government service.
Without a doubt.
And I think there's tremendous ways that people don't necessarily realize, in a very simple way, that government makes differences in their lives that are beneficial on a daily basis. Maybe it's through regulation and making sure that folks have access to clean drinking water. Maybe it's through regulation making sure access to the land and zoning that people build their homes and buildings on aren't built on top of sinkholes or areas that could be subject to natural disaster. And I think we need to make sure that we're talking to the simplicity and reality of how government services not only help people but are a blatant necessity if we're going to function.
Without a doubt. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? I mean, this is, and you talk about, just zoning and planning and code violations or whatever, not violations, but coding, so that people can sit there and have a house in a place that is going to stand. And if you do have a problem, you have somebody you can call. That's the hope. But you don't want to be the hope. You don't want it to be like the DMV, where you go and you have to sit there on hold and wait for an ambulance to show up. And if they start cutting funding for these things, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah,
I feel. And so, especially in the rural communities, again, I always have to think back. This is my state now. This is a state where it is very, very rural. And so what happens, you're absolutely right. Because you call 911, how long is it going to take? When I was campaigning, I was out west, far out west of it's out near Unser and 550. And so you knock on a door and, this woman comes and she's obviously taking care of an elderly person. I said, well, and I just, by chance, how long does it take to get an ambulance here if there's a problem? Oh, he fell last Thursday. Really? How long did it take? It took a half hour. Do you want to wait a half hour when your elderly person is on the floor? What happens if it's a heart attack?
Right.
If you're waiting a half hour,
Difference between life and death,
don't show up. Send the mortician.
Yeah.
So yes, you're absolutely right, and those things people forget about because it's just there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't think about that stuff every day.
And to your point, I think something that maybe even, there within any massive organization, there's going to be inevitabilities for waste and fraud. We as a party, though, can speak to the necessity that we need these programs to exist and are against waste, fraud, and abuse.
Right.
We don't. What I'm concerned about with this the current administration and the president's incessant use and always speaking to the inefficiencies of government through the lens of waste, fraud, and abuse is pointing out that Democrats is ignoring the reality that Democrats have also long been in favor of cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. Now we can maybe be more meticulous and more surgical about it and making sure that it's in proper areas that aren't as chainsaw directed in the ways that the current administration is doing it, that we're seeing the cascading effects of people losing their jobs and having to be reemployed because they cut the wrong people, because they're approaching it not with the scalpel of precision. But I think we as a party can stand up for the fact that, we don't support waste, fraud, and abuse. We just believe in a basic social safety net where if you work 40 hours a week, you shouldn't live in poverty, where if you're showing up to work every single day and your kids have gone to school through primary education and done the best they can, they shouldn't be drowning up to their eyeballs in student loan debt just for an opportunity to be able to afford a home, to be able to afford a family.
Right.
There's ways that I think that we as a party can not embrace some of the premises of the GOP, but continue to stand strong with how we really feel about how government policy can and does help people.
Right.
So that's just something I wanted to tie back to, because it's something I feel strongly about in talking to people.
Right. And I think that all goes back, getting people into the job market, getting people good jobs, paying jobs. And again, it goes all back to, why do I support unions? And the reason I support them is because they will give you those tools that you need to succeed, number one, and they will take care of you. So you have things that you have health care, you have a pension and stuff like that you can put into. And at the end of the day, or the end of your time, you'll have something that you can retire on instead of working as a greeter in Walmart. And so, yes.
Can just very briefly, because I in the spirit of keeping it simple, I just want to ask for folks out there, and I know when I talk to a lot of young people who might not be as politically engaged in me and some other folks, what is a union? Why are unions? What the hell is a union? Why is it important? Why should I be interested in a union as opposed to my right to work?
Well, your right to work, you can do whatever you want to do, but the union will teach you how to do it correctly, number one. And I'm not saying that there are people that are non-union that are plumbers that don't do a good job or whatever they do. But when you're doing something, a union is a collection of skilled workers, okay? And so that union will then go and fight for their workers, for a fair price, for a fair wage, I guess I should say, for benefits. So it's not an individual up against a corporation. It's the union up against
workers
collectively.
Yeah.
And so you can use them as, it's a corporation versus a corporation now, because now we can afford lawyers just as expensive as the corporate. Thank you. Right. I don't know why I couldn't think of corporate, but anyway, so it kind of makes it almost on an equal footing. Instead of you going up against the corporation, now you have that. How are you going to negotiate your pay when somebody says, "Well, I don't care about you, Bo, get the hell out"? Well, that's the way it should be, right? Well, no, not necessarily. if you did your thing and you did it well, you should be compensated for doing your thing. And so there's all types of unions. There's a bakers union. There's
The NFL has a union, the NFLPA, that I don't think people talk about enough.
Yeah, whatever. And so you have, so in all the trades, you have unions. And this is a place where they take people, they take young kids, they'll take immigrants, they'll take whomever, and they'll train them, teach them how to do it right. The union, the electrical union, they'll teach you how not to die on the job. Don't touch that wire, that kind of stuff. They are very, very important to us, and they're very, very important to the workers of the United States. And they really are the backbone of the United States and how we get things done. And you talk about clean air and clean water and stuff like that. Yes, and that's what the unions will do. Make sure that there's a safe environment for you to work in. And that's one of the big things that I look at. So yeah, go out there, kid, and here's some stuff. Go ahead and do your electrical work out there. And then everybody laughs when you get zapped, But if you're talking about, 50,000 volts, it's a little bit different. So and let me just circle back to one last thing. I think that the youth, and I think we talk about, I talked about us being in a bubble, but I also think that the youth also is in a bubble. And we need to start puncturing these bubbles and start talking to each other instead of the youth all sit there and talk about, oh, this is the problem we have, blah, 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 blah. And we talk about all this stuff over here, and we don't communicate to each other. So we have to puncture those bubbles and start communicating. And I think as a party, I think we'd be better off with that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I just want to ask one last thing in closing. You talked about very briefly about the Feed Rio Rancho program. I wanted to ask you how folks can find out more about that, what it does, and how they can get connected if they want to.
Yeah, you can go to the Unitarian Church. You can, my God, I should know this stuff off the top of my head, and I don't. Feed Rio Rancho Kids started a couple years ago, and it's growing. And all it does is it packages food for weekends for kids. And so we have a bunch of volunteers that come in. I'm not part of it per se. I'm one of the volunteers that goes and fills bags so that kids have food on the weekend. Feed Rio Rancho Kids, you should be able to go online and look it up and get it. And anybody that's young has the savviness to sit there and type it in, and you get there. You can give monetary donations. We do it at the Unitarian Church in Rio Rancho. You can go to their website and you can click, and there'll be a pop down, and you can feed Rio Rancho. You can give money, or
And is that every weekend that happens, or
no, once a month we get together and we do it, and we put together somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 300 bags for kids for the next month while they're in school. And so it'll start up here at the end of August, and we'll hit it again.
Cool.
So,
great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great organization. They'll always use food, always need food. They always need money to buy food for, and it's just amazing that you have, like I said, or alluded to, that, you think of Rio Rancho as being kind of this affluent place, and it is on certain places and not on certain other places.
Right.
So you can, and if, kids just need food.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Very basic.
Yeah. Sorry I didn't come prepared with that. Otherwise I should have had a little poster or something.
Well, that's okay. Well, Greg, thank you so much for doing this podcast on the Keep It Simple Silly, our very first ever podcast. I want to make sure that we continue to talk to as many people as possible, and I appreciate you sharing your story. I know maybe there's some things we missed. We could have kept going, but I know we've already talked for a while. So how can people find out more about you or get in touch with you if they want to get involved in Sandoval Democratic County politics, or maybe they want to fill one of your ward chair positions?
That's
how can they get in touch with you?
Go to our
find
website, sandovaldems.org, and there'll be buttons you can push.
All right.
And you can contact me that way. That's the easiest way.
Perfect.
Okay.
Well, cool. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in to our first ever podcast. This was, again, the Keep It Simple silly podcast. My name is Bo Sandoval, Congressional District 1, Vice Chair for the Democratic Party of the State of New Mexico. Again, here with Greg Bennett, the Chair of the Sandoval County of Democratic Party. And we are very thankful for his time today and hope you all hopefully learned something, engaged in some way or another, and at least found out more about one of our esteemed county party chairs. So thank you all, everyone. Till next time. This is Bo Sandoval, and I want to personally thank you for tuning into the KISS podcast, where our whole goal is to keep it simple for the members of our community. We hope to catch you again next week. We're on every single platform where podcasts can be found. Catch us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Music, YouTube. We'll also be on Facebook. And more than anything, if you enjoyed this content today, please be sure to drop us a like, leave us a comment on what we can do better, or what you'd like to see more of, and most importantly, share this with folks who haven't yet seen the podcast. Thanks for tuning in again, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye. Hey, before you leave, just wanted to personally invite you on to the Share Our Story series of the podcast. Every other week, we're going to be hosting someone from our community to hear a bit more about their personal story. You can see some of the details on your screen right now. If you're interested in joining, we would love to have you on the podcast. Sign up at that QR code there or right down below at the link. I'd be thrilled to have you and hope to see you soon. Thanks for listening.